In the last 3 decades, a landmark of neoliberal globalization has been the restructuring process followed by the large multinational corporations by reallocating part of their productive services and commercial processes in the global south in search of cheap and flexible labor as well as natural resources. The geographical shift, this geographical shift has engendered a new trend in trade and the modalities of unequal exchange. Although this is not a new or emerging trend, except in the innovation sphere, and I won't be able to talk about this, unfortunately. What I will try to introduce in this presentation is a new way of conceptualizing this global megatrend in the north-south horizon. My presentation will be divided in 4 parts. I will begin by drawing some crucial elements of the morphology of the current global capitalist context, focusing on the restructuring process followed by the large multinational corporations. At this point, I will introduce a key analytical category, the notion of global networks of monopoly capital. I will then turn to a second key concept, the exportation of labor as a fundamental pillar of the contemporary international division of labor, as well as a key notion for envisioning the immersion of new modalities of unequal exchange. I will then briefly illustrate my main points in reference to what I regard as a paradigmatic case, Mexico-US asymmetric and subordinated integration process under NAFTA, and end up my presentation with 4 concise concluding remarks. In the current capitalist context, monopoly capital stands as a central agent. Against the myth of free market, a pillar of the neoliberal ideology, monopoly capital posits more than ever before as the kingpin, the epicenter of the overwhelming global political and economic power. Most of the impressive growth of monopoly capital nowadays rests on new forms of generation and expropriation of profits, extreme exploitation of labor, and the pillage of natural resources in line with mega fusions and strategic alliance where financial capital has played a fundamental role. Another key feature of neoliberal capitalism is its unprecedented levels of capital concentration and centralization. The top 100 transnational or multinational corporations today concentrate around 2/3 of the global wealth. In a similar tenor, the large multinational corporations operate at a truly global scale, some of them with presence in 50 or more countries. And in this setting, the manufacturing sector continues to be the key player in global trade, concentrating 70% of all exports and 77% of private investment in research and development. A peculiarity of this phase of internationalization of capital is without any doubt the expansion and reallocation of multinational corporations to the periphery. To give a rough idea of this impressive turn, according to UNCTAD, in 2008, nearly 60% of the assets, employment, and sales of the top 100 multinational corporations were concentrated in peripheral countries. This denotes a new nomadism, that a new nomadism has emerged within the system of global production with locational decisions determined largely by where labor is cheapest. Moreover, an outstanding feature of the contemporary global architecture in its genuine network articulation with corporate arms disseminated in an increasing number of countries and world regions. At least 40% of the global trade is associated to outsourcing operations, subcontracting and intra-firm trade. And 85 million workers are employed in assembly plants in the South, with over 3,500 export processing zones established in 130 countries. To characterize this capital restructuring megatrend, we have coined the category of global networks of monopoly capital, in reference to the reorganization strategy led by the large multinational corporations who, through outsourcing operations and subcontracting chains, expand parts of their productive commercial and services processes to the global South in search of abundant and cheap labor. This strategy entails the establishment of export platforms in the South that operate as enclaves, allowing multinational corporations to obtain fabulous, extraordinary profits in the form of monopoly rents, taking advantage of the relative immobility of labor and the existence of low subsistent wages in the periphery. For instance, hourly wages in China were in average 10% of those in the US, and in Mexico, 60%. The political economy of global labor arbitrage is crucial for disentangling this global megatrend. I would add that most recently, the restructuring of innovation systems, employing greater amounts of scientists from the global South through outsourcing and offshoring operations, has become an important component of these global networks of monopoly capital. In this slide, you can appreciate another crucial global trend: the growth of labor migration and the even faster growth of labor migration from peripheral countries. A key element for understanding the way in which peripheral economies are reinserted in the current global architecture is through the implementation of structural adjustment programs. These programs trigger three movements in peripheral economies. First, the dismantling, rearticulation of the productive apparatus. Second, the shrinking of the formal labor market and the overflow of informality, the growing of the labor reserve army, the upsurge of emigration processes, forced emigration processes. This triple movement has shaped a peculiar modality of exportation, what we have conceptualized as the exportation of labor in two modalities: the indirect or disembodied exportation associated to outsourcing operations with no upward or downward linkages with the domestic economy, and the direct exportation of labor via migration, labor migration. The exportation of labor in its two forms yields a new international division of labor, which in turn engenders new modalities of unequal exchange. Much more severe than in the past. The net transfer of revenues through outsourcing operations and the transfer of the social reproduction and educational costs through the emigration of workforce. We can add the transfer of the capacity to generate extraordinary profits through the restructuring of innovation systems. More than any other Latin American country, Mexico has followed with tenacity and scrupulous rigor the Washington Consensus recipes, fostered by NAFTA. In many ways, the Mexico-US regional integration process could be regarded as a model of neoliberal restructuring in middle-income peripheral countries. A first and quite amazing result, as can be visualized in this slide, is the transformation of Mexico's export platform from a primary to an apparently, and I want to emphasize this, manufacturing export platform, including a significant component of high-tech export goods. In a relatively short time frame, Mexico became one of the world's leading exporting economies. By far, Latin America's top, far beyond Brazil. However, this is a quite distorted vision of reality. As shown in this slide, the main component of Mexico's manufacturing exports are maquila-like products. That is indirect or disembodied exportation, labor exportation. This means that instead of advancing from a primary export to a manufacturing export platform, Mexico actually underwent 2 steps backward to the establishment of a sub-primarization process. So because the main merchandise we are exporting, Mexico is exporting, is labor in these 2 modalities. It is important to realize that nowadays there are 6,283 export processing plants installed in Mexico, employing 2.3 million workers and exporting 180 billion US dollars. The above trend should be complemented with the impressive, truly exponential growth of migration to the point of making Mexico the first emigration country in the world. It is worth noticing that this impressive growth of Mexico-US migration began with the implementation of structural adjustment programs in the early 1980s and continues at an even greater rate in the NAFTA era, as can be easily seen in this slide. No? It's almost... Given the above characteristics, instead of manufacturing export model, what actually was imposed in Mexico along the neoliberal era is what we characterize as a labor export-led model. It implies a regressive trend in Mexico's development process with severe consequences, as shown in this slide, for the working classes. A growing labor reserve army, 60.1% of Mexican workers immersed in informal activities, an extremely narrow formal labor market and employment segment of the labor market, increasing forced migration, plus growing insecurity and a truly explosive economic, social, and political scenario that is based on these systemic violences. And my last slide. To conclude, monopoly capital operates as a central agent of the neoliberal restructuring process. Global networks of monopoly capital incarnate a corporate restructuring strategy for the expansion of imperialism in the neoliberal era, together with financialization and extractivism. Labor exploitation has become a key echelon of the new international division of labor under the mask of manufacturing exports. And finally, this implies a regressive trend for sustainable development in the North-South horizon that forces unequal development together with new trends in trade associated to the emergence and new and severe modalities of unequal exchange at a global scale. Thank you.